Welcome, everyone. It is 6:02 on Monday night. You're listening to the 106th installment of the Age Out Angels Radio Hour on www.hamiltonradio.net, Channel 2. I'm your host, Greg Rapport. I'm the founder and executive director of Age Out Angels. We're a 501c3 nonprofit corporation. Age Out Angels provides one-to-one mentors to vulnerable youth for the purpose of coordinating the care and services that they need to survive. We try to help young people avoid some of the horrible pitfalls that they're likely to face if they don't have a proper safety net. And this program is brought to you every week at this same time, courtesy of Doc G, William Saunders, Ruben Rodriguez, and all the fine people here at Hamilton Radio who allow us to use this airtime. Ruben is on the big board tonight. Robin is with us producing. So good to have both of you here. And thank you so much at home for tuning in. We've put together what I hope you will find to be an insightful and compelling view of the child welfare system and related issues that improve our communities. So get ready, because tonight on the radio hour, a very, very special lady, Amelia Franck Meyer, is going to be with us. She's the CEO of a nonprofit in Minnesota called Amelia Innovations. And she's way out in front of the new direction that the whole child welfare system in the country is about to embark upon. This is on a national level. When it comes to child welfare, time is actually just catching up to Amelia Meyer. And we're so very lucky to have her on our program tonight. Stay with us for the full hour. I promise you'll be just a little richer for having done so. And stay with Hamilton Radio all night long for a combination of great music and talk. The Monday night lineup is really starting to take shape. At 5 o'clock, it's Urban Economics and Development. Then we come in from 6 to 7. And after the Age Out Angels radio hour, it's the Rome Show, talking sports for an hour. And at 8 o'clock, a couple of Mondays a month, and it happens to be tonight. Stay on the station, because you will hear Let's Talk with Kat and Bran. And then at 9 o'clock or thereabouts, Freestyle Freaks. We say 9 o'clock, but you know they are freestyle freaks, so you never know exactly when that show is going to start. But there'll be great music playing until it does. So stay with Hamilton Radio all night. Keep it right here all night long. Great talk and great music. Now, please, take a moment, open a separate browser, and find us on Facebook if you're listening on the radio. Go to my name, Greg Rapport. Hit that share button or email your whole address book and tell them what we're doing here, because what we're going to be talking about tonight is actually something that has national implications. It is something that applies to every area where you live, and what we're talking about actually needs to be shared. This is a very serious topic, and really children's lives hang in the balance of what we're going to be talking about tonight. So tell your friends, don't keep this private to yourself. There's a whole generation of people who are out there who are being forgotten, and people who care, like you and me and my guest. We just can't sit still while that happens. And while you're doing that, let me remind you that we're here almost every Monday from 6 to 7 with the Age Out Angels Radio Hour. Of course, I say almost because we are going to take the next couple of weeks off. Happy holidays, everyone. I hope you had wonderful Thanksgiving, and I hope you have an even better holiday season leading into the New Year's. We'll be off the next 2 weeks, so to enjoy the holidays with our families. And we'll meet you back here on January 6th. But of course, while we're away, we always are mindful of the people who don't have all the beautiful things that we have. I went to a Weight Watchers meeting, and we were all talking about, oh, goodness, Christmas is coming, Hanukkah's coming, Kwanzaa's coming, we're going to stuff ourselves, there's going to be so much food. Well, guess what, there are a whole lot of people out there who don't have any of that. Don't have to worry about watching their waistline, because they can barely get enough calories to get through the day, and that's important. So be sure to tune in every Monday at 6 p.m. for our unfiltered look at the child welfare system and other related community services. This is where you come to get the whole truth, and I promise what you will hear tonight, you will not hear on the nightly news. And since we're live, I hope our caller calls in, because if she doesn't, it's going to be you and me talking to each other for the next hour. Amelia Innovations. I want to tell you a little bit about her company before she calls in, because her credits are so extensive. I would waste all of her airtime just telling you about her. Amelia Innovations is a national nonprofit organization focused on transforming how child welfare is done in this country. She was the former CEO of a company called Anew Family Services, which is a Wisconsin-based organization. And she transformed that organization, producing nationally recognized child permanence and placement stability outcomes for children in out-of-home care, and is on the leading edge of promoting and measuring well-being. Anew is, like I said, is a solid organization in the Wisconsin, Minnesota areas that excels in treatment, foster care, intensive permanence, and trauma services, parent coaching, a lot of training the trainers here, community-based flexible support services, parenting coach certification courses, training and consultation. And under her leadership, that's Amelia Franck Meyer's leadership, Anew won the prestigious Bush Innovation Prize. They won a Youth Thrive Award for exemplary programs and a Eureka Innovation Award from the Twin Cities Business Journal. Amelia will be calling in from Minnesota, I believe, unless she's on the road. Anew also has received honorable mention for the 2011 Council on Accreditation's Innovative Practices Award. This list goes on and on. They got special recognition for quality initiative. In 2015, Amelia was named as the recipient of the prestigious Bush Fellowship by the Bush Foundation. Amelia is an advanced practice social worker in Wisconsin and a licensed independent social worker in Minnesota. She has a master's degree in social work from the University of Minnesota, a master's in sociology/marriage and family from Illinois State University. She has a graduate certificate from the University of Minnesota in disability policies and services, and holds a permanency and adoption competency certificate from the University of Minnesota's Center for Advanced Studies in child welfare. She also has a doctorate in education in organizational change and leadership from the University of Southern California. Amelia spent over 27 years serving children and families in the areas of out-of-home care. That's sort of her specialty. Also family-based services and disability services. Prior to the time she worked at Anew Family Services, she worked for 4 years in a community-based and residential training center with children, adolescents, and adults who were deaf and blind. She is conversational in American Sign Language. And she also worked for 8 years in an out-of-home care and domestic violence treatment setting. Amelia received the 2015 Alumna of the Year Award from the School of Social Work at the University of Minnesota, 2010 Alumna of the Year Award from the Department of Sociology at Illinois State University, and was named the 2010 Emerging Leader. I just can't believe this list of credits, by the College of Education and Human Development at the University of Minnesota for achieving early distinction in her career path. Amelia served on the National Association. Where does she get the time to do this? That's my first question. Of social work boards, the Association of Social Work Boards, working on the National Social Worker Licensing Exam. In addition, Amelia is the co-founder and former secretary of the Association of Macro Practice Social Workers, designed to further training, networking, and public policy. Amelia has presented nationally and internationally on topics including understanding grief, loss and trauma for children living in out-of-home care, child well-being, child permanence and placement stability, change management, social work leadership, management supervision, and many other topics. Amelia has consulted through Casey Family Programs, and if you're a regular listener of this show, you know that the Casey Foundation is our mothership. That was to provide training and consultation on child welfare practices. Amelia has consulted with the University of Minnesota School of Social Work and served in various community representative roles, including Master of Social Work Advisory Committee, review of curriculum standards for human service management. Amelia is the author and co-author of several articles in national publications, including Achieving Permanence for Children in Out-of-Home Care, the Use of Media in Foster Homes, Trauma, Grief, and Loss, and Converting an Organization to a Well-Being Focus. Amelia served 2 terms on the National Foster Family-Based Treatment Association's Board of Directors, as president, actually, among other titles. She is currently the chair of the President's Advisory Council and as the Foster Family-Based Treatment Association of Minnesota and Wisconsin State Legislative Liaison. Amelia has taught social policy coursework at the University of Minnesota and also at many other colleges in her area. Amelia has served on the Council on Accreditation Social Policy Standards Revision Committee. She was an invited member of the State of Wisconsin Department of Children's and Families Rate Regulation Committee and the state's and the Secretary's Rate Regulation Committee, Finance Subcommittee, Performance-Based Measures Subcommittee, Practice Model Development Committee, and Future of Child Welfare Initiative Steering Committee. Amelia, if you're listening, I'm so glad. That's all, because honestly, I was running out of breath. We're going to take a quick break right now. What I want you to do, please, is hit that share button and don't go away. Do we have a caller on the line? We do. Amelia,
yes,
are you there?
Amelia.
I can barely hear you. Are you there?
I am. It's Amelia.
Oh, Amelia, thank you so much for calling in. You know what, guys? Let's skip the break, okay? Did you hear your credits, or did you just tune in as I finished?
No, I called without an answer, so I just got in.
Oh, okay. So here's the thing. I just spent the last, 7 or 8 minutes reading your list of credits. And
my goodness.
And I mean, seriously, you've won so many awards. The only thing that I could think of is when your children grow up and you downsize, you're going to need a whole other truck just to move your awards to your new home. Welcome to the Age Out Angels Radio Hour.
Thank you.
It's so good to have you here. When I heard you speak, it really sort of blew me away, because I felt as though like you were ahead of the world, that the thinking that you brought to the table is something that the world, and maybe through the Family First Prevention Act, is now just finally kind of catching up to. So,
well, yeah. That's nice of you to say.
So it was actually pretty neat. And what I'd like to do, if I may, is kind of get right to it, if that's okay with you.
Sure.
So the organization Amelia, where does that come from? Where does that name come from? And tell me its focus.
Yeah. So the name Amelia means to be called to something better, or to a higher way, a better way, or a higher purpose. And so it doesn't stand for anything. It just means, has that type of meaning in several different languages. And so when we launched Amelia in 2015, we worked with someone to find a name that represented what we were trying to do, which is to call people to a different mindset, a different way of thinking about what children and families need to thrive.
Excellent. Okay, and so this whole story sort of really kind of starts in infancy, doesn't it?
Well, I would say the story starts before you're born.
Before you're born?
Yes.
Explain.
Well, we know that trauma is passed forward up to 7 generations. That's indigenous wisdom, and it's biblically referenced, and so we are the culmination of what has happened for many generations before us. We also are the result of the chemical messages we received in utero about our welcome and unwelcome, or the level of safety in the environment to which we were coming. So I think it's before we're born.
Wow. So that whole thing about playing classical music for an unborn child, that has an effect?
Well, I can't speak to that particularly, although I believe when I was pregnant with my children, I did read that, and I did talk to them and read story to them. But what we do know is that the uterine barrier is crossed by chemical messages. So women who were pregnant in 9/11 had babies who were born with heightened levels of the stress hormone cortisol. So we know that they received messages, hey, it's dangerous out here. You better be ready for fight, flight, or freeze. So, yeah, we do know that the things the mother feels, the things the mother experiences, gets translated chemically to children in utero.
And that sense of vulnerability, That sense of vulnerability, seems to be something that, long before they have speech, they actually do sort of have a sense of.
Oh, absolutely. So humans are the most vulnerably born mammals on the planet, right? Other mammals, when they're born, can go for a swing in the jungle or crawl to the food source, but our human babies lay there and cry until someone comes to care for them. And if somebody does not arrive to do that, they don't make it, and they know that vulnerability from the second they are born.
Yeah. So then, what becomes important are the connections.
Well, I'll be more specific because I think in our work we have thought that what becomes important are the connections. And in fact, they are important. But what I'm talking about is what becomes important is the connection to a protector.
Ah.
And so if a child has many connections, that's great. That enriches their social network, their network of support. It's a lovely thing, only if they have a single nurturing, stable connector and protector. So really it's very important for children to know that someone is on duty for them.
Now, I'm looking at some of the slides from your PowerPoint presentation, and there's an interesting one here that says, from the moment children are born, they're asking, am I safe? Am I lovable? Can I trust you to meet my needs? So
Yes.
so that seems to go beyond vulnerability, right? Because am I lovable? That's like validation, right?
No, actually, it is the same kind of human vulnerability, because if you are not lovable, people will not do the things necessary to ensure your survival. So I don't know if you have raised children or loved children, but it's a heroic act to get a child through birth and infancy and toddlerhood, and to do all that needs to be done to nurture them and to ensure their survival. And so it goes contrary to our own survival needs, right? We often sacrifice sleep or eating or making a necessary trip to the restroom because we are attending to a child's or baby's need. And so in order for you to be motivated to get up for the fourth time in the middle of the night when you feel like you're part of some kind of government experiment on sleep deprivation, you have to have a child who is lovable and worthy of us sacrificing our own survival needs. So lovability translates directly to safety and survival.
And when it says, can I trust you to meet my needs, is that what you're talking about, like a single person?
Yes, it is. But really, all these questions come back down to one thing, which is, am I safe? Right? Am I safe? But we break them out because it's not just physical safety. And we've really convinced ourselves in the field that physical safety is the only thing that matters. And because of that, we do things that we know cause lifelong predictive harm to children in emotional, relational, and mental ways in order to ensure physical safety. So what these are saying is basically, am I safe? Is my heart safe? Is my mind safe? Is my body safe, right? And so this is the idea of saying it in those ways helps us to not forget that we're not just talking about physical safety.
And then these things that are sort of covered when a child is like a newborn or even before, they then have an impact on the whole rest of their lives?
Absolutely.
Huh.
So, we all come wired for connection, and when we reach out to ask for our needs to be met, so through crying or feeling discomfort, and then we give an indication to those around us that we need comfort through reaching out or crying or struggling, and then those needs are met, right? Then we have this idea that the world is safe and we can trust others, we can connect with others, we can form relationships. And that's, being wired for connection. But if you reach out for those needs and the needs are not met, or you get told, I'll give you something to cry about, right?
Right.
Then you get wired for protection. And the difference is I rely on you or I rely on me. And if we have a brain that says you can only trust yourself, you can only rely on yourself, then folks who have had that experience find it very challenging to connect with other people and to trust other people and to regulate their own emotions. And without those things, you cannot parent well or partner well. You can't hold down a job because the first time somebody sets you off, you react in volatile ways and walk out or do things that get you fired. So all relationships rely on our ability to trust the connection, to be in relationship with other people, to handle the ambiguity of relationships, and to be able to self-regulate enough to stick them out.
So I mean, this is just so dramatically different from when I was growing up. You know, I mean, the whole thing 30, 40, 50 years ago was, you know, kids don't remember anything. You know, you could, they're good at recovering. They recover fast. You know, it was as though, don't worry, they're kids when it happens, so no big deal. They'll get over it. You know. And so
we used to call that in our field la tabula rasa, meaning that they were a blank slate, right? And you could just do what you needed to do, and they were really resilient. But very, very directly, this knowledge existed 40, 50, 60, 70, and 80 years ago. The science existed. And if you want to learn more about this, you can Google the Harlow monkey studies, the Reese monkey studies by Harlow. Mm-hmm. And he showed that when children, or monkeys have it, but it extrapolates to children, but he showed that when monkeys were raised without a mother, even when you introduced a mother later, they couldn't form the connection.
Wow. So that all starts at that one spot. And this was known years and years and years ago, and what, kept under
nearly
wraps?
A century.
I mean, you know, it was something, it was just sort of pushed to the back.
You know, there's so much to say about that question about why we don't know this. But, you know, there is a very strong human desire to protect children and to rescue and save them, right? And so we just have misguided ideas about what will help them, right? So if a child, the worst thing that can happen to a child is the death of a parent, and the second worst thing is to be separated from a parent, then our work really needs to become, how do we help parents to safely parent? Not when families struggle, as they do, how do we remove children from their parent and disconnect, blame, shame, and punish parents, and then provide services and therapies to children and expect them to get better? Right? So we really have a whole new way of looking at our work once we understand that what every single child on the planet needs, every child, is for their mother to be okay, their mother is not available, their father to be okay, or a permanent, stable, nurturing caregiver, preferably someone to whom they are related.
So, all right. So what about, you know, sort of adoption from birth? That sort of thing. Does the child have a sense that its birth mother has abandoned them, even though this new couple comes along and has a nicer house?
Absolutely. That when children are separated from their parents, it creates a primal wound. And there is an enormous community of adult adoptees who are searching and trying to fill the void. You can hear story after story about adults who were adopted right at birth and who will tell you, you know, that they always knew something was off. They never felt like they really belonged. They never felt fully lovable. And I'll tell you, I'm not anti-adoption. And I think I need to say a few words about this. And I do think that, you know, there's always an exception story, right? Or someone who says they've done just fine. But there is a large community of people who were adopted as infants and young children who are really starting to talk about the ramifications of child and family separation. You know, we have historically moved to out-of-home care out of family care and placement very, very quickly, very early, without fully exhausting who the people are who the child knows and loves or to whom they are related. So we do not do exhaustive search. We do a diligent search because our caseworkers are ill-equipped and ill-resourced to be able to spend the kind of time necessary to identify and work to cultivate family placements. That's number one. And number two is that many times the available people might need something more to be able to be safe enough to raise this child. But we don't do that because we have a cultural need for punishing. And so instead, we'd rather support a stranger or another family to care for a child than care for their family. So when I do believe in adoption is when we have exhaustively searched the entire network for a child. So that's all the already trusted adults, people who the child knows and loves or to whom they are related. We've exhaustively searched that. There is no possibility that their parents or someone else in their family could be able to safely parent this child with the proper support. And essentially, there's not another option. Then absolutely, I would want a loving home to adopt that child. But I rarely see cases where an exhaustive search has been done or the supports needed to safely parent have been implemented with the family.
I think more often the minimum search is done. Not the maximum.
It depends on the jurisdiction, right? I mean, some are better than others, but frankly, we're under tight timelines. They're short-handed. They're under-resourced. And, I mean, people who do this work know what kids need, and if they had the time and capacity to develop these relationships and to do the search at this level, they absolutely would. But we have wildly under-resourced the front end of our system, and instead our resources go into the deep end where we pay for high-end care for children who have been systemically traumatized.
Right. And we're going to get to that more in depth in just a few minutes. But first, I have to ask you about this slide I'm looking at right now from your presentation. It says children do their plan, grief, loss, and trauma. They don't talk it.
Yeah, they do their pain.
Their
grief,
pain.
Loss, and trauma. They do their pain.
What
does
that mean?
So we call these pain-based behaviors. So kind of our natural state as humans is in loving kindness to one another. So when people act in ways that are neither loving nor kind, it is an announcement of past pain. So someone has harmed them. And we generally don't talk through that harm, especially children. They act it out. And so we refer to those as pain-based behaviors or trauma responses. And the way you know they're there is when the stimulus is small, but the response is disproportionately large and dysregulated. Mm-hmm. It's an indication that there has been past pain there that you are reactivating or rewinding.
I see. Okay. All right. So then we end up sort of facing this moral dilemma where you have a family that's struggling, and you have insufficient resources to support them. Coupled with a cultural need to punish them, right, and focus on physical safety. So the next step is we sever relational connections, right, resulting in another wound, and then insufficient resources to search for already trusted adults. So a new family is created, or many people or families are involved, and no family is ever recreated. Now.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. You go ahead.
Yeah, and one of those things happens, right? So we find a completely new family unrelated, or we have a lot of different families where a child moves from place to place to place, or there's no family ever recreated where essentially a child ages out of care with no one, and I put no one in air quotes.
Right. So, I mean, well, basically, we all walk around the social services nonprofit world talking about how much we know about being trauma-informed. But at the same time, this whole process seems to be creating, yet another layer of trauma.
Absolutely. I mean, there are times when parents cannot safely parent. And that happens because, in almost every incident, something happened to them. Something happened to them, and they never got the help or healing that they needed. And now we're in a situation where we have to sever the familial connection according to our current way of work. And in doing so, we literally create an adverse childhood experience in that separation, which is something we're trying like heck to avoid because we know the lifelong predictive harm of family separation. And so it becomes such that our interventions actually replicate the primary challenge as a way of healing. It's like kids are acting out because they're not connected, they're not safe, they don't belong, and as a response, we disconnect them and put them in places where they don't belong and they may be unsafe.
Yeah. Well, we look at families that need help, and I mean, I see this sort of thing all the time with my work with Age Out Angels, and sometimes a family needs help because a husband is incarcerated, a mother's working 2 or 3 jobs. She just can't possibly live up to the responsibilities of parenting. Other times, I see a drug addict who's bringing boys into the house. I mean, there are a myriad of different reasons that a person ends up in a situation where they can't parent, and lots of times it's a girl who grew up in foster care, turns 18 or 21, ages out of the system, and says, I'm going to have someone who's going to love me unconditionally, and has no idea what it's like, to raise a child, has no idea what they're in store for when they get pregnant.
Or because they were left unprotected, they don't know how to protect themselves.
Right.
And so because they have been victimized, they fall prey to other predators, because they did not learn how to protect themselves, or they don't feel worthy of protection. And so I promise you that what we're seeing when parents are unable to safely parent, they did not receive the consistent, nurturing, loving support that they needed when they were children. And so we have to stop asking what's wrong with these people. We have to stop punishing these people. And we have to say, what happened to you, and how can we help you walk through the pain and the grieving of what happened to you so you do not replicate it to future generations.
So you're saying, like, of all the different categories of situation that I might be able to describe about the reason a child is in that abuse or neglect setting, regardless of what that is, that home is still the place that has to be addressed and fixed, not a different home.
I'm saying that if, our question has been, what would it take to make it safely possible for this child to be raised by their own parents? What would it take?
Yeah.
And in our current way of work, we do not bring to bear what it would take for that to happen. And so we have some clear ideas on what it would take, but that is not part of our current way of work. And so, if you are removing children and placing them somewhere else, we act as if that will solve the problem, but it does not, because you have left the parents, you have left the parent or parents now with the worst thing that can happen to them happening, right? Removal of the child is the worst thing that can happen to an adult. The death or separation of a parent, of a child from a parent, is like the worst thing that can happen to us as humans. We can get through anything if we have each other, but that separation is a primal wound. And so now, in an effort to help the child, you now have a parent who is completely incapacitated. The chances of them being able to fight their drug or alcohol addiction is incredibly hampered, right? And they're also available to, frankly, have more children. And then there we are with the child, where all they really need is for their caregiver to be okay, and need to know that they are lovable and can trust their primary caregiver. But now they have an interrupted sense of belonging. And so with each and every disconnection from an adult, they they disconnect further, they harden their hearts a little further, and it becomes less and less possible for them to trust other people, which is the core foundation of how humans function.
Yeah. It's getting those core emotional needs met. That
Yeah.
that.
So I want to say just another further word on that, actually, if you don't mind. I don't mean to interrupt.
I don't mind at all. No. It's your show tonight, Amelia.
This is why I really started out as a child advocate, right? So my deal was getting kids out of foster care to permanence, and got really good at that with my team, won lots of innovation awards for that, and was all about protecting the children and getting the children to permanence. And what it has turned out, the more I have learned and the more I have seen, is that you cannot be a child advocate without being a parent advocate. And so it turns out that no service, no evidence-based practice, no model, no therapy, nothing we do for a child will ever be as good as their parent being able to safely parent them. Nothing we do. They don't need anything more than that. And they certainly don't need us. They need them. And so even if you really don't care about parents, or frankly, if you strongly dislike them, and I have met lots of people that strongly dislike parents, even if that's the case, if you care about children, you cannot pretend to be a child advocate if you are not simultaneously an advocate for their parent.
Absolutely. Now, there's another interesting slide here that I thought I should bring up. Rather than remove a child from a home, would it be better to do nothing at all?
Well, that's sort of what the slide says. So I'll just give you the backstory on that, because that's actually a quote from applied behavioral economists that we worked with when we published the social return on investment study. So our question, was really around, we're investing $29.9 billion a year annually in this country for this way of work. What are we getting for it, right? Mm-hmm. And so what we learned is that when we do foster care well, if for every dollar we invest, we lose $3.64. And when we do it how we typically do it, we lose $9.55 for every dollar invested on a $29.9 billion budget.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So this is done by a company called Ecotone Analytics, and the person who did our analysis does analysis for the World Bank. But before we send it out to the field, because it's quite a controversial outcome, right?
Right.
We wanted to be really sure that it was accurate, that we hadn't missed anything. So we sent it out to a bunch of experts in the field, including a USC applied behavioral economist. And he wrote back and said, I don't understand these numbers. Because frankly, what these numbers say is that it would be better if you all did nothing at all. That from a social return on investment perspective, the more you do, the more you lose. And from an outcomes perspective, the more you do, the worse it is. I don't understand, you should just stop. And my response back was, right, that's what the numbers say, but it's not possible to just stop, because some children would be seriously injured, harmed, or the worst of all outcomes, they may not make it. And so we can't do nothing, right, which means we better figure out what to do. Right? We better figure out a different way of working than what we've been doing.
Right. I love the double negative. It works just fine in that. But nonetheless, with the way we have been doing things, we seem to be creating an adverse childhood experience every time we do an out-of-family placement. That's a point on the test, right?
That's right. That's right. And we just are learning so much more about the implications, the long-term implications of this way of work. I mean, Mark Courtney's got the Midwest studies and the outcomes for children and youth who have spent time and or age out of care are well documented. We have a ton more research about the impact of trauma, about the neurobiological and sociobiological needs and attachment needs. We just know so much more than we've ever known. And about the implication of family separation and out-of-home placement. So frankly, we talk about this a lot where we come from. for the FDA to approve an intervention, you have to prove that you are doing less harm than had you had done nothing at all. And we would not be approved. Out-of-home care, foster care would not be an approved intervention if we had to go through the FDA. And so we're just really learning now that, in all good intentions, we set up a system based on a set of assumptions that we know to no longer be true now, right? And those assumptions were that if we took children away from their families and put them with better families, they would fare better. And we know now that that is not the case, right? Mm-hmm. In addition, those beginning assumptions were full of explicit bias and systemic racism. We were taking children away, and still are in largely disproportionate numbers, taking children away from Black, brown, and Native families and largely placing them in white families, white schools, white therapists, etc.
Sure.
And so we know better now. We have a moral obligation to do things differently.
Fascinating. So what is the National Child Abuse and Neglect Prevention System?
Yeah, we don't have one.
Oh.
We do not have a National Child Abuse and Neglect Prevention System. The current child welfare system was set up on the assumptions that children belong to their families and that no one got involved unless they were harmed. So our system was set up to protect children from being abused and neglected after they had been abused or neglected. So it's a secondary prevention system. We have to wait until children are harmed until we can do anything about it.
Right.
And so we really need a primary prevention system. And that's part of what Aaliyah is working with brave leaders around the country doing, is building a proof of concept that the public child welfare system can function as a primary prevention agency. We do not need to wait until children are harmed before we help parents to safely parent.
So right now, if we ask the question, whose job is it to support parents until they can safely parent their children, the answer is really not anyone in particular at this moment.
That's right. I mean, some great nonprofits have stepped up to try to fill the public gap, but there's not really a system. And even within our systems, we don't yet have this job, right? We have things called parent educators, but the challenge isn't that people don't know how to parent. The challenge is they're in so much pain that they are numbing it with drugs or alcohol and can't safely parent.
Right.
Or that they are living in abject poverty because of the systemic situations, or because of their childhood trauma. And so we have parent educators, we have parent mentors, but in my opinion, what we really need are parent kind of long-term sustaining partners, parent healers, parent partners, who are people who can walk side by side with parents who are struggling until they come out the other side. And that would mean that they stay with them until they're better. And that might mean 3 months or 3 years, if that's what it takes. And their caseloads would need to be so small that they could really give the time and attention needed to working with highly traumatized people.
Yeah, what you're really suggesting here is a whole paradigm shift in the way we approach this concept of child welfare.
Absolutely. We're really fundamentally rethinking the way we do this work and moving away from how do we keep children safely from their parents to how do we keep them safely with their parents, right? Absolutely. So right now, when families struggle, as all families do, our immediate reaction is keep them safe from those people. And instead, it should be that we have early indicators that all of us, these families are not new news to the teachers. They're not new news to the neighbors. Like, we have early indicators when families are struggling and need help. And so how do we keep those families safely together? What would it take? And really fundamentally thinking differently about our purpose, not removing children from their families, but helping parents to safely parent.
Absolutely. If you just joined me, my guest is Amelia Franck Meyer. She's the CEO of Amelia Innovations. And what we're talking about here, if you just joined the discussion, is really a kind of a redesign of the entire child welfare system, because right now the focus of the child welfare system is on how we separate a child from a situation that we believe to be unsafe after it's already happened. And Amelia, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that in the oversimplification point of this whole thing is that we need to look at these kinds of circumstances way before we address them at this current juncture, and see what we can do to actually work with the parents in order to keep that family intact in a way that will enable the child to flourish and not cause the additional trauma of having them be removed. Am I synopsizing with?
Yes, that's just great.
Okay, good. um, um, so okay, so I mean, what you're saying is that basically the traditional child welfare system essentially kind of undermines the existing family. It's like we catch them doing something wrong, right? And
Right.
I think that's why, like, so many people that I come into contact with don't want to be a
Mm-hmm.
part of the system. Like, they'd rather fly under the radar, even like homeless families, if they can, because they don't know what will happen to them if they expose themselves, to someone who then becomes in charge of their family.
That's right. That's right. And so, I liken it to when families are struggling in that way, with homelessness or poverty or mental health or addiction. If they were to come for help, they would not get it. Right? Most often in those situations, they run the risk. At least they run the risk of losing their most precious thing. They run the risk of the worst thing happening to them, which is to lose their child. So they can't ask for help early. They can't come in where we could be so much more efficient and so much more helpful early, but they can't ask for help early because they run the risk of losing their child.
Yes.
And so when the house is on fire, we show up with gas.
Right, and pour it on. All right. So what is Amelia Innovations doing to sort of advance this agenda?
Well, we, really have spent some time thinking about how we might design a better child welfare system, and we knew we wouldn't have that answer alone. And so in May of 17, we invited 100 innovators from all over the country, so 10 federal and tribal and 10 state, 10 county, 10 nonprofit innovators, 10 people with lived experience, although it turned out a third of them were folks who had lost kids to the system or raised in the system because they were also running counties and nonprofits, et cetera. And so we asked all these people over a 4-day design session with IDEO out of Stanford Design Schools, where they're from. And they usually have clients like Coca-Cola and Levi and Apple and such. But we asked them to help us redesign child welfare. And at the end of the 4 days, the 100 people said to us, "You have asked the wrong question."
Wow.
We don't need to redesign a better child welfare system because when it works well, the perfect child welfare system already exists. It's called the family. And so instead of redesigning a parallel bureaucracy, we need to undesign that and get closer to supporting families to raise their children. And so they called this concept an unsystem. We don't know what it'll be called in the future, but for now we know it's not this system, it's an unsystem. And what they said were the key components of that were natural community supports and valuing rather than disconnecting family ties and having culturally specific family-driven supports and consistent connections. So it wasn't a hotline call and investigations and ongoing and then a different therapist and a different worker for this and that, but really just a person who stood by you to help you. Those resources were locally delivered and built on intergenerational well-being and joy and put the whole family at the center. And then they gave us guiding principles so we'd know if we got there, which were to protect relational connections as sacred, nurture the capacity for joy, not only in children and families, but in the workforce. If we're doing the work in a way that diminishes our capacity to parent and partner well, we're doing it wrong. Helping people should not be killing us. And it is killing people. It is People are dying at their desk. 40% of the workforce is diagnosable on any given day with secondary traumatic stress.
How about that?
Yeah, you want to say something about that?
No, I'm feeling secondary traumatic stress as we speak about it.
Yeah, it's a serious thing, and it's because of the way we're doing the work. People know what people need, and they can't get it to them, and that causes moral injury. And it's the kind of exhaustion that sleep does not cure. So the other guiding principles are daring to share power with one another and with our families, committing to intergenerational well-being, and trusting the wisdom of children and families to design their own futures. And then a saying we use at Aaliyah, when you're not sure what to do, you do what love would do, which means you do what you would do for someone you love. So we have leaders around the country who are taking these principles and the idea of an unsystem and are practicing it in their work to build this kind of way of work. And we call them the Aaliyah Unsystem Innovation Cohort, and they've been working together for about 18 months now. And we're just getting ready to publish, just in a week or two, our year one release of that cohort. And really what they focused on was shifting the mindset about what families and children need to thrive. And after 1 year of this work, with no new roles, no new laws or policies or funding, they ended up being able to reduce across the board the number of kids in foster care by 12% and the number of kids in residential by 37%. And that momentum is just building. Those numbers are even better than when we initially submitted the report for publication. Some systems, dropped by 61%, and others were able to keep 94% of the kids who came to the attention of the system safely with their families. So there's just some really great things happening as we're working with brave leaders around the country who are trying to implement some of these practices and try work in a new way.
Fantastic. And Amelia, listen, this is an ongoing thing. This is like an early clue to the new direction here. So I'm going to need you to come back, every few months and tell us what the progress is and how things are going. I hope you'd be willing to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right to say, there's not one thing that's gonna really make all the difference here. It's a bunch of things and a bunch of people. And so we really love working with our partners all over the country, not just our public partners, but our other nonprofit and change maker partners who are trying to do this work in new ways and learning from them and sharing with them and bringing them together so that we can learn from one another. So there is a coalition of people out there who really understand that this is the way our field is moving, and they are early adapters and innovators who are trying to now figure out how do we get there and then help others by paving the way.
Yeah, I think that's the message moving forward. This is the direction that we're going, so let's get good at it,
Right.
Okay. Well, unfortunately, that's all the time we have. But boy, I could just talk to you for hours and hours. So I was serious. You have to come back sometime, okay?
Yep, just let me know. You know where to find me, and I'd be happy to come talk more. I mean, really, I do think you're right. There's so much that we're learning from the brave people doing this work, and there's so much to share with our judges, with our caseworkers, with our resource parents who will play a very important role in the new way of work, with all families, really, who are trying to love and raise children. There's so much for all of us to learn about this way of being with kids and families.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for calling in. And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen, another hour talking about youth who should matter more in our political and economic discourse than they do. And we thank you so much for tuning in and maybe helping spread the word. Again, we offer humble thanks to Hamilton Radio, to my most excellent guest, Amelia Franck Meyer. Let's make a date to meet right back here on January 6th. We're going to take 2 weeks off, but I want you to put January 6th on your calendars right now. And hey, while we're away for the next few weeks, let's not forget about all the children that we've been talking about this evening. We're going to be celebrating with our families. We're going to be overeating and complaining about it. But these are difficult times for people who are in need, and you need to keep them in your mind. And if there's a child you can reach out to, don't hesitate to do that. Thanks to our engineer, Ruben. Music provided by Angel Fire. Our webmaster is Carmen Garcia Valera. Our social media specialist is Bailey Braverman. Happy holidays, everyone. Let's make the next 3 weeks the best 3 weeks ever. Good night, everybody.
When the war jets and then the fire.